The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to our Southern California PGA, Northern California PGA Chat. Welcome to Friday, the 17th of April. We've got a lot to cover today, and certainly let's start a little bit with some good news, I feel, from Governor Newsom's discussions this week with us that is very complimentary to the people of California in terms of abiding by the protocols and helping to flatten the curve and get us back to operations in many different forms. And that he'll discuss with us in about 2 weeks, which is now about 10 days, a little bit more about reopening and some of those details. Also, good news in terms of the Employment Development Department, the EDD, due to the overwhelming amount of applications that they've received. Come Monday, the call hours will be extended from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Each day to handle the volume. And on top of that, the announcement of primarily a system better adapted to independent contractors and the self-employed in terms of applying for unemployment benefits. And that will roll out on April 28th. As we put in our section newsletter last night, and has agreement now with pretty much with national and across the country. I'll talk just for a moment about our dues, that the dues deadline has been pushed to October 31 for both section and national dues. The billing will occur at the usual time on or around May 1st, and we have the option to pay in 2 installments. One would be the section dues, section portion, and then up until the national portion until October 31. So the idea is that you have the opportunity to, of course, pay them at any time between the time of receiving the billing and October 31st. Ultimately, it can even go out to June 30 of 2021, and then with no penalties or no late fees, but there will be a non-active categorization come November 1st if everything's not paid. So we're grateful for all the teamwork of HQ, and we've got Mr. Easterbrook and Mr. Price and Mr. Brawley with us this morning. Hopefully Scott Wellington can join us. So thank you for the cumulative and collaborative work between HQ and the sections on easing that dues situation as best we can. Keep in mind, if you've not registered, please do so later so we can get your MSRs posted. And at this point, I'd like to have some opening remarks from Northern California President Dee Moriarty.
Thanks, Len. I know we got a lot to get through today, so I'll be really brief. Just first of all, thanks for the opportunity just to say greetings from San Francisco, where we've been shelter in place for about 40 days. And thank you to Tom and Len for the great job in setting up these chats and all the speakers that are so great to keep calling in, because it really means so much to us just to get this current real-time information. And once again, just really super grateful for the technology that lets us do that. So I suppose if there is a silver lining through all this, it would just be, that we're getting to enjoy, really precious time with our family. And we can hear that through our section phone trees. So I'm happy, as Len said, to hear a little bit of hint of optimism coming through. It seems like the first time in a long time. And for all those that celebrated Easter and Passover last week, I hope you had a wonderful holiday. And for those that celebrate Orthodox Easter this coming Sunday, wishing you a very happy day with family. And we'll throw it back to Tom, I think.
Oh, Tom can't hear you.
Throwing it back to Tom.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, got a little bit behind there, and thanks, Len. As Len mentioned, we've got a big program today, and thanks to Jeff Price and John and Tom Brawley for being here. Len also mentioned MSR. I'd like to remind you too that the PGA has graciously extended the MSR period to finish up in June of 2022. So that's a good thing. We've been quite busy with these kinds of programs for the last few weeks, and will continue to be so through the COVID crisis. And so there's a lot of credits to post. And so it may take a little bit, just want you to know that before your credits are posted, but they will be. And we assure you they will be. I'd like to remind you too of the websites that are available to you, whether it's ncpgalinks.com, scpga.com, or pga.org, that has all of the updated information regarding COVID and anything dealing with the SBA, EDD, any of those departments that are absolutely necessary for our industry going forward. And encourage you to keep up to date in that regard, and on a daily basis, and sometime on an hourly basis. One more thing is Caitlin Doyle will be monitoring your questions this morning and this afternoon if you're located beyond the Pacific time zone, and we will attempt to get to all of your questions. Please use the question box that's provided through GoToWebinar, and we will monitor those. And if we don't get to your question today during the webinar, we will certainly get to your question through a response via email from the various parties and individuals involved in this call. We also have our regular panelists, Craig Kessler and Kevin Fitzgerald today. So we'll be covering what's going on in the state of California. And with that, enjoy the next hour, hour and a half. We have extended the time, if necessary, to 11:30, by the way, so 90 minutes. And I'll remind you too, and with Mr. Brawley on the line, if we go to 11:31, that gives you an extra credit. So we're going to do that as well. But Mr. Brawley might have something to add to that. But just kidding, of course. There he is. Thumbs up. All right. With that, now back to Mr. Dumas.
Thank you, Tom. And good trivia question there, that a PGA MSR hour is actually a 31-minute hour, so it works in our favor. A little bit more good news, and then we'll move to our speakers. There's more golf open today than there was yesterday. Placer County issued an open today, as long as the golf courses follow the guidelines that they have received. And so some courses will open and more will roll out tomorrow, Sunday, as we get to Monday. So that's good news. And I know there's more golf in Southern California as well, and I'm sure Craig will cover that at that time. So let's move on. First off, to start and talk to us about the Golf Emergency Fund, which launched yesterday. And again, thanks to everyone at PGA HQ and CEO Seth Waugh, because Seth was a real driving force to get that fund started. So I'd like to bring Jeff Price into the conversation. Jeff, again, thank you for taking the time and going from call to call to call to be with us. We really appreciate hearing from you. And so it's all yours. Jeff, thank you.
Thank you, Len, and good morning, everyone. Just want to take a second, Len and Tom, to thank you for your leadership, and the collaboration within California has really been a model across the country in terms of sections working together and trying to make sure that PGA professionals are getting the best and most comprehensive information possible. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the Golf Emergency Relief Fund, which launched yesterday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And due to the heavy demand and the need that has been evidenced, the phase one of the program will be closing today at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So if you have not gone in and registered and applied, a little less than an hour before phase one, due to need, will be capped. A couple of important notes to make: that there were some technical challenges yesterday. E4E, the entity that is running the fund and ultimately administering the website and the approval process, had some technical issues with the application side of the website. But the good news is the registration side was working fine. And in terms of the first come, first served basis of the fund, the registration timestamp is what matters. And so those PGA professionals and industry folks that went in and ultimately started an application process, registered, started the application process, but did not finish, you'll have until 1 p.m. Pacific time on April 22nd to complete the application. So if you've gotten in, completed the registration, and started the application process, there's still time to work through that. As I said, April 22nd, 1 p.m. Pacific will be key. Wanted to just get into a couple of other points of note, because obviously I'm sure there's some concern of those that haven't gotten in as to kind of what happens from here. And I think the good news is that we've always planned for phase two. The $5 million lead donation that was made by the PGA of America was to get this started and to get phase one going. But another $2.5 million was put into play as a matching program. And Seth and the leadership team have been working closely with the allied organizations across the country to also contribute to help workers in the industry. And I think it's critical that that is kind of phase two, getting additional support from the industry. And then next week we'll begin a consumer outreach to enable folks that love this game to help the folks that are in need. And the way we've been positioning that is obviously golf gives back tremendously all the time. And now many in golf, the workers in golf, PGA professionals are hurting. And it's time for those in the game that love the game to help those that are in need. So the Allieds, along with outreach to consumers with a campaign that really started with Seth on CNBC this morning and already has generated some interest based on the audience that CNBC has in terms of how people can help. So there will be a phase two. The essence of that is, I want to just explain the difference between phase one and phase two distribution plans. The first phase, which again is closing today, basically offers two tiers of funding: $500 grants for basic needs and up to $1,500 grants for critical needs. And again, that is on the first come, first served basis based on when you registered. The second phase will begin at the completion of phase one in terms of payments being made, and we'll have a longer application process, and the grant distribution can go up to $3,500, again, based on need and an approval. The phase one grants should be paid about 2 weeks after it is approved. So that is good news. The idea was to put money into play as quickly as possible to help those in the greatest need. Phase two, the approval and distribution process will be longer, and it'll take approximately 6 to 8 weeks from submission to approval and the distribution. So again, the distributions will be made based on the payment preference that you selected in the process. And again, if you have specific questions, E4E is the key entity that is running the program, and relief.golf is the destination to answer those questions for you as it relates to the specifics of your individual situation. I know there have been some questions about why such a broad industry group that was involved in the process and as a part of the fund. And I think the intent really was to try and find a way to help as many of those in need as possible, and position golf that will be in a position when we get to the other side of this to be really one of the first sports that folks can play in across the country, and ultimately give the opportunity for folks to get back to work and engaged in this great game. The idea of kind of thinking through also the parameters that we have, and we talked about it previously as it related to the dues situation and the inability to waive dues. You know, as a 501c6 organization, there are specific not-for-profit parameters that the IRS puts on what organizations with our tax status can and can't do. And the IRS inurement regulations just prevent organizations like ours from giving direct financial benefit to members. And so by being able to think about this from an industry perspective, we lift all boats in the industry and also are able to make sure that PGA professionals are a part of the process. And so I think that is a quick overview of the steps to date. E4E expressed their sincere apology to any of you who were going through the process early yesterday morning after it opened. And I know there were long wait times and some folks were knocked out. E4E apologizes for that. They were able to get the load balance on the site working later in the day, and I think folks have been able to get in and apply and make sure that they've registered and then ultimately put their applications in play. If anyone was in a situation where they were initially dismissed for a reason of not meeting the criteria that was in the site, you are registered and you do have an opportunity to go back in and kind of clarify what your parameters are. And so if you were in that situation, I would suggest going back in and revisiting to check the information that you provided to make sure that it's accurate, because I know there were some challenges in completing the forms. So Len and Tom, I think that's an overview of where we are today. As I said, phase 2 is the next point of emphasis, obviously getting the funds out from phase 1 and then really beginning the development of phase 2 with big focus against incremental fundraising to hopefully put the $2.5 million matching fund, and hopefully the consumer outreach will take us beyond that initial $10 million that we were targeting. It's certainly, there's a lot of need out there. We understand that and working hard to try and see to get as much dollars and as much help as possible to the industry. Len, Tom, I'll turn it back over to you.
So Jeff, thank you. Thank you for the explanation on the process and where we're headed, and also about the dues and the IRS and our C6 designation and such. I know it gets pretty technical, but everyone's been very grateful for the explanation of the whys and why nots and for some of the ifs. So Jeff, if I may just clarify with you that phase 2, the couple of the characteristics that really separate it from 1 are a little bit of a longer application process, and this is now the phase that can take the relief up to $3,500. Is that a pretty good summary? And it's a longer period.
100% correct, Len. Yes, it will be a lengthier application process based on the amount of the potential dollars being distributed on an individual basis, up to $3,500. And so the process will be longer, and it'll be about a 6 to 8 week process versus a 2-week process off phase 1.
Jeff, thank you. And we're very grateful as PGA professionals and members, and for our associates and our allied associations to be able to have this relief. So job well done for everybody on such a large scale. And I'd like to turn it over some opening remarks from our PGA of America Secretary, Mr. John Linder. John, thank you again for being with us and taking your time to share. I know Michigan's been in the news. Governor Grisham's been in the news quite a bit recently. So I hope everything is well with you.
Thanks, Len. Yeah, actually, it's snowing here in Michigan, so I don't have to worry about any golfers. But we are looking at having 50-degree weather this weekend, which will bring golfers out and will challenge the governor's order. We are at stay-at-home at this point. Golf courses are considered non-essential here in Michigan. However, the governor has left it up to local law enforcement agencies to enforce the stay-at-home order and golf courses. There's been a lot of confusion here in the state, and obviously there's been, as you watch the news, you saw the gridlock protest on the Capitol lawn, which is about a mile from my club. As I've stated, the governor lives about 100 yards from the entrance to the club, and the mayor of Lansing lives across the street. So I'm in a little bit of a tough situation here with enforcement, but as I said, the local law enforcement agencies are put to task to enforce it. Recently, the Lansing Police Department said they're not going to enforce stay in place or stay at home order if people are on a private golf course. So we will be somewhat open. Our doors will be locked. We do not have pins in the cups, but we do have cups cut. We do not have tee markers out. But I would expect to have probably about 25 to 50 golfers on this golf course tomorrow when the snow stops and the sun comes out, and maybe even more on Sunday, which causes a little bit of a challenge from a publicity standpoint. As Jeff said, we did have some glitches with the Golf Relief Fund, but we're working through all that. I give a ton of credit to PGA HQ staff. They've been working really, really hard on everyone's behalf, and these calls have been great to be on. They've been informative from my perspective. Susie and Jim are attending as many as possible as well. I know I've got a couple calls later on this afternoon to be on with a couple other sections. And it's really interesting to see how creative people are getting during this time. I'm actually going to New England virtual happy hour tonight at 5 o'clock, which is Eastern time, which is going to be interesting. I've never done one of those things, but we'll see how that shakes out. And we're just keeping plugging along. I know Mr. Brawley's worked hard with the membership committee. We have a conference call tomorrow next week, and trying to figure out what other things we can do to benefit the members aside from the extending of MSRs. We did get some questions. I got a question yesterday regarding the dues and the extension of the dues, and what would that look like for the following year for 2021, since we're looking at October for your dues being due for 2020 and a compressed time period. We've discussed at a very high level that compression from October of 31 of 20 to June of 2021. So nothing to be determined at this point, but just know for a fact that it is being discussed, it is being considered, that we do have that compression of time that we have to deal with for a lot of our members. As always, we're always here. We are approachable. We are reachable. You know how to get a hold of us via email or via cell phone, and we would help in whatever size, shape, or form we can, whether it's just sitting on these calls or whether it's being available to answer questions, or if it's sometimes offline altogether. The officers and the board itself are doing all we can to try to answer any questions that our members come across. So with that, I don't really have anything further to add, as Mr. Bryce did a great job with the Golf Relief Fund.
Thank you, John. Again, thank you for joining us. And, there's a lot going on, and the tide is turning as facilities are opening. I mentioned earlier here in California. So good news on the horizon, and nice to see events getting rescheduled. So good luck. You've got a lot going on right outside the gates there. So good luck, and keep us posted. I'd like to circle back just a moment. I think, Caitlin, you have a question regarding the emergency fund, correct?
Yeah, it looks like we had one question about it. It says, are we able to change the need level? I was able to complete the application. However, there's not a way to answer for future need. For example, we are able to pay mortgage this month, but we'll have problems in June.
Jeff, do you want to handle that one?
Sorry, I was trying to look at the questions and couldn't get back to the mute button. Let us, Tom, there were a number of specific questions that I saw in the webinar. And unfortunately, as it relates to that specificity, we need to go to E4E, who is managing the kind of granular questions on that. So I will try and take all of those questions and send answers back out so that you can forward them to the team. I don't want to misspeak on this because it is being operated by E4E, and that granular level, as I said, of question is one that they're best positioned to answer. So not trying to pass the buck, but I honestly don't want to misspeak and we'll get you answers to those questions ASAP.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll get those to you as soon as possible after the call is completed. Sorry, Len.
No, all good. Tom, so I'd like to toss it to Tom Brawley. Tom, thank you for joining us this morning. Tom, any additional comments or things we need to know about the dues billing and such? Okay, maybe. All right.
Hey, Lynn, it's John Easterbrook. I can probably handle that one as well.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what Tom may have not found star six yet, but I'll give it a shot. So yeah, the posted this morning. You all should have received something from the sections about the dues being pushed to 1031. That's consistent across the whole 41 sections, and we got good buy-in on that. And if you've listened to Seth's messages, his messages have been about making sure that all the sections get to the other side of this situation, and we all get open. So we appreciate both the northern and southern California sections, coming to the table on that, doing that for their members and working with us. You can pay it, and again, this is on the website, but you can pay it in 2 tranches. You can pay your section dues anytime between the billing and 1031, and you can pay and you can wait on the national dues, which are our insurance and liability and MAP at 1031, and that totals this year $161. So you can pay that at 1031, pay your section dues earlier, or you can pay it all at once, or you can wait all the way till 1031 to pay everything. The only other caveat there is there's a reinstatement clause in our bylaws, and this would not count. There's a one-time reinstatement clause that says if you can only basically go inactive and reinstate one time. If you somehow, some way had to go inactive this year because of COVID, that would be the reinstatement would be waived it wouldn't count as your one time. So, or if it was your second time, it wouldn't count. So, trying to be as flexible as possible. Working through, I'll just kind of roll into working through 41 section calls in the last 10 days, talking about cash flow, talking about our ability at HQ with the tournament uncertainty and the changes, how we can work together to work through these issues. Nobody really knows what we're doing or what the timeline will be as to when we are back open. And as Jeff and I were on a call earlier today, we're starting to work on phasing golf back. But what impact you all are operators like me. What impact will that be? Our members are going to, if we have limited operations or we're not allowing carts or, clubhouse isn't open, at some point the members are going to go, wait, I want some relief too. So that impacts the bottom line. And maybe it's already happening. Green fees and fees at daily fee and public golf courses are impacted. Lesson income is impacted. We need to start to figure out how to ramp all that back up and poise ourselves as an industry of when we're open so that we can start driving top line revenues that we all had budgeted, 60 days ago or 30 days ago. So lots to figure out. But we are working with the GCSA, the CMAA, and the World Golf Foundation on an allied message that aligns a little bit, aligns a little bit with the 3 buckets of the pillars that are coming out from the White House on reopening America. So we were going to have medical applications that are applied, as it relates to safety, not only safety of our guests and our members, but safety of our employees. So lots of complications, lots of, as we've started these calls and as they've morphed over time, to counties and city officials making decisions. It's still a very regional and very local decision-making program, but hopefully you will see in the next 10 days a unified approach to, for lack of a better term, get back to golf. And just know that that's what we're all shifting our focus on, certainly in the HQ office, to start the message around that. So I know that wasn't just dues, but I figured I'd just throw out a little bit more on how we're all working toward.
Okay, John, we lost you at the very end there, and thank you.
Am I there? Am I there?
There
Am
we
I
go.
there now?
Yes.
I just ended with we're all focused on get back to golf. We know junior league golf and junior golf is critically important to you all. We had a conversation as late as this morning, on scheduling and what we're doing so that we're poised and ready to go with our programming, as the sections and as each of the facilities open up and get back to some sense of normalcy. So that's kind of been our shift and our focus. And I ended with, that was a little bit longer than just the dues question, but I thought I'd throw that out there and let you all know that we're moving in that direction. So thanks, Lynn.
Okay, John, thank you. I think as we're realizing that getting back into business has its complexities as well, but certainly we look forward to every day that we are closer to that. So John, would like to just confirm, Jeff, that we will send the questions to you and that will present an opportunity to respond. And then any final thoughts from either one of you?
I'm actually trying, Len, to get answers to these as you're speaking and putting some answers in. So hopefully I can answer them before this is over and enter them in. If not, we'll take the questions and get you answers back.
Okay. Jeff, thank you so much. So again, our thanks to our Chief Commercial Officer, Jeff Price, and our Chief Membership Officer, Mr. John Easterbrook, for all the really tireless work. I know we say that quite often, but it's the truth. And it's a big machine. It's a national machine. It's very, very complex, getting more complex, and they're at it day and night, keeping us informed on both ends. So we mentioned earlier that there is more golf in California today on Friday the 17th than there was yesterday. So I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Governmental Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, Mr. Craig Kessler. Craig?
Thank you, Len. Thank you, Tom. And let me again say congratulations to the two PGA sections. The work you've done on something that was totally unanticipated by any of us 30, 40 days ago before the world changed has really been exemplary. I've gotten a sense of just how much a family both sections are and just how well connected they are to the national. My hat is off to you. Having said that, I was just in the process of answering a question: are any public golf courses currently open in California? That's a good segue. The answer to that is yes. The municipal golf courses in Sacramento County and in San Luis Obispo County are open. In the case of Sacramento County, we have a public health officer who does not play golf, but who was so convinced of what we are all convinced of, that golf can be played in a manner very consistent with social distancing orders under all directives, both statewide and local, that he's an outlier and he's permitted golf in that county, which other than the city of Sacramento is quite rural. San Luis Obispo County is the same result, but it's a slightly different approach. There are so few golf courses, and the relationship between the county golf operation in San Luis Obispo and the public health operation, everything's a little tighter in a rural county like that, was such that they had the attention of the health officer to thoroughly make their case. That has not been the case in the mega counties that have enormous populations and are extremely dense, where the danger of virus spread is considerably greater. Having said that, let me say that the SCGA and I know the Southern Cal PGA section kind of reversed a little bit of our coverage of this in our communications just a few days ago, because we see two things. We see some definite openings, which I characterized at the light at the end of the tunnel. We're still in the tunnel, but it's the first time we've seen a little bit of light, in the sense that within Governor Newsom's press conference the other day and his outline of reopening the economy of California, which is not much different than the outline the White House came out with a couple of days ago. But I'm going to trust that everyone on this call understands, because you're all in California, that we will be tagging all of our messaging not to the White House version, but to Governor Newsom's version. Tagging anything to the White House in California is not a political winner, and we want to win in this case. So that's what we will do. And I think that's what John was referring to, that the national organizations will set a template, and the way it's executed will be very different in very different parts of the country. Now, you heard at the opening of the call that Placer County, which has 27 golf courses, so it's pretty substantial. It's not like some of the counties that had 12,000 persons in the northwest corner and one 9-hole golf course. So that's significant. I can't share all the details because where the golf community has been most effective, a couple of things have been in common. It's been where the golf community has been quiet, measured, nuanced, diplomatic, supplicatory, and has worked in unison as one industry. Wherever, and I'm going to caution, wherever, as a practical matter, I think everyone on this call plays golf and understands the industry thoroughly and knows that when that time comes in different places at different times for golf to reopen, the pretty onerous social distancing requirements that are going to be in place on day one are going to be much easier to meet at a small equity private club than they are at a big municipal golf course. And they may come back online earlier, not because of a distinction that was made going in that somehow they were different, but on the fact that they can accommodate a set of rules equally applied. The difference may strike you as unimportant. For someone who labors in politics all the time, that distinction is everything. So where communities have stayed together, Ventura County has been a particularly good example, and the munis and the most exclusive of private clubs have decided that golf is golf and have acted as one. They're doing far better than, for example, although we're not giving up, we're going to work assiduously in the desert. One of the great ironies is that in recent days or in recent weeks where golf is most concentrated, actually most concentrated in the nation, some of the persons, elected leaders from those communities, have said some of the clunkiest things about the game of golf. We need to have a plan to rectify that. So, and I'm referring to Riverside. I'm referring to the Coachella Valley. So golf will come back on at different times. We're seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but I would caution all of you that the sort of quasi-civil disobedience we've seen practiced, it may feel good, it may feel right, but I would caution that it is just not very effective. And if our common goal is to bring golf back on board at the earliest possible date in the phase-in, whether you read the phase-in program of the White House or governor or the Capitol in Sacramento, it's really the same thing. Certain things will come back slowly over time. Dodger Stadium will come back on last, as will the Rose Bowl and various other things in that brand new, beautiful stadium that the Rams and the Chargers are getting set to move into. They may not be able to debut that stadium, but golf will come on well before then. And I would just caution that if we play our cards right, we'll do better than not. In terms of, in answer to a question I know that came up earlier, while we've been, with respect to the PPP, which ran out of money sometime yesterday afternoon, there's been there will be more money added to the program. It's just a question as to exactly what the details will be of the additional money. Something happened while we were on this call in that the House Republican leader, who is a Californian, Kevin McCarthy from the Central Valley, has agreed to include hospitals and the medical profession in very specifically. And that's in a move in the right direction, I think, in bringing the two parties together who have some differences. If I had to characterize those differences, Democratic Party's holding out a little bit because a lot of very small businesses that weren't borrowers or weren't preferred customers of banks, because PPP goes through lending institutions, were getting frozen out. They just simply didn't have the lawyers and the CPAs that somewhat more sophisticated and larger businesses with ongoing relationships with some of the banks had, and so they weren't able to get it in quickly enough. So that's the holdup. In a funny sort of way, since many of the golf operations that are probably on this call resemble those who got crowded out or may have made application, may have been told that it was incomplete. I have a banker friend said that fully half of the applications they received, not just from the golf industry, but from all industries, were either incomplete or simply so deeply flawed that they really couldn't deal with them. And that may explain some of the problem. I would also encourage everyone to take a close look, particularly if you're out of a private club, a C7, at the EIDL, which is a disaster relief program that Congress expanded as part of the CARES Act and added substantial money. I don't think that's quite run out of money yet, but it may have. It is not as generous as the PPP. There are not forgiveness terms in it, although there is a $10,000 grant involved, but it's an extraordinarily generous loan program. And right now it is the one that's available to C7 corporations, which is really virtually all of the country clubs in America fit that category. I know the national organizations are working hard to include C6s and C7s in the PPP. I'm skeptical of the success of that effort. That's not a comment on their lobbying prowess. That's just a comment, I think, on the way I read the politics. However, by lobbying that point, they may find some other way to help the C7s through some other legislation that comes down in the future, or maybe even add more money to the EIDL, perhaps make the terms more generous. All efforts are worthy at this particular time. So I think Len, Tom, I think I've exhausted whatever special information or any special knowledge that I might have of where we stand moving forward. And again, I would just conclude with the notion that some of the differentials and anomalies you see are because the way in which California's governor decided to handle this was not a one-size-fits-all model. It was to establish minimum standards that every county in the state had to meet. But we have the largest municipal government in the nation in Los Angeles County with 10.2 million persons. And we have a couple of counties in this state, a few, that have less than 25,000 persons, in which social distancing is exactly the way they live every day. There are very few, if any, golf courses. There are very few, if any, businesses, to be quite honest with you, that there's no crowdsourcing. So that I will just keep in the back of your mind. I know it's hard to look at silver linings at a moment like this because things are pretty dark. I guess there's a slight silver lining in the sort of light at the end of the tunnel of coming back on board. But also, this governor, the way he's chosen to approach this bodes very well for the golf industry, particularly when it comes to water issues and environmental issues, because I know that our greatest complaint or lament is always that Sacramento doesn't understand, then fill in the blank. And generally, the farther you get from Sacramento, the less they understand. So water issues and environmental issues and all kinds of issues are extraordinarily local and particular in nature in California, with its 80+ microclimates and various water sources. So keep in mind, it may be a little confusing, and it's one of those great ironies is that you can't play golf in San Diego today, but you could. But if the governor wants to tee it up this afternoon, he doesn't have to travel very far to tee it up at a public golf course in Sacramento. But that anomaly is created by this federated way in which Governor Newsom decided to handle this. And we'll make sure that as we get back on board and pick up the pieces and try to figure out what the industry, how much the damage is and what the industry can look like moving forward until we get back to full normality, which will be some time. We can remind this governor of the wisdom in the way he handled this as we begin to handle other issues moving forward. So with that, Len, Tom, again, let me praise both of you, the section, all these professionals, the PGA of America. I just think it's been almost exemplary in the way in which to handle, this. No one anticipated this. Nobody wanted this, but it's been I've been, and those of you who know me know I'm not easily impressed with much. I'm very impressed with this. And again, thanks for the opportunity to be part of this familial atmosphere in a time of crisis.
Well, Craig, thank you. Thank you for your comments, but more importantly, thank you for your insight. We have not let you get very far away from us. And again, you've just donated totally unselfishly your time and your expertise to guide us. So you're as integral a part of this as any one of us, and just making us stronger each and every day. So Craig, we're going to circle back with questions and thoughts. We do have William Weissman on the line. William is here with us in Northern California with Littler Mendelson, and has a time constraint. So that's the jump in the schedule, if you will. So William, again, thank you for being with us, and your comments and thoughts. Certainly some good news from Governor Newsom about the extension of the EDD call hours, call centers, but also the rollout for independent contractors and the self-employed in terms of unemployment insurance. So William, good morning. Thank you for being with us, and we'd love your insights on that, please.
Sure. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yep.
Okay, great. So finally, EDD has sort of rolled out a time schedule and a phasing of benefits. And so there are 3 phases that they've announced. The first is for the time period February 2nd through March 28th, payments of $167 per week. Phase 2 is March 29th through July 25th, and that is $167 plus the $600 per week. And then phase 3 is from July 26th through December 26th, and that is going back to the $167 per week. And so what that really means is for an individual that doesn't qualify for regular unemployment, but is qualifying for these pandemic unemployment assistance benefits, that's what you're going to receive for claims for those periods of time. So just be aware that the dollar amounts, differ a little bit depending upon the weeks of the claims. EDD also said, and I know people have been filing claims and we've been hearing, that they've been rejected, but EDD will begin accepting online applications for PUA beginning Tuesday, April 28th. Now that doesn't mean that claims are only on a forward-going basis. You may have a claim that goes back to February 2nd, and that's fine. It's just they really haven't had, the technical systems in place to handle those claims. So beginning April 28th, if you are a person, an individual that doesn't qualify for regular unemployment, and that can be for multiple reasons. It can be because you're self-employed or an independent contractor. It can be because you simply didn't have sufficient employment in the base period, the last, basically 5 quarters. Even though you are employed, it can be because you've actually already exhausted unemployment from prior employment that has nothing to do with COVID-19. So it's not just for self-employed people. It can be for others who who don't qualify for regular unemployment. And they will have a portal hopefully available that makes that clear. There's guidance on their website, edd.ca.gov, that'll walk you through it. You know, for the PUA benefits, it isn't quite as broad as regular unemployment in the sense that you have to be unemployed for a COVID-19 reason. You have to be able and available to work. The looking for work requirements still are a little hazy. They are suspended. Again, not entirely clear how long and what that really will mean, particularly for your industry as courses begin to reopen across the state. You know, some of those parameters may change a little bit, but that's really the update. So if you have filed a claim and it was denied, you know, wait till April 28th and refile again. But you know, don't hesitate to file back to as far as February 2nd to claim benefits, if that's in fact, you know, the time period in which you've been rendered unable to work due to COVID-19. And that's really it, short and sweet. Hopefully, you know, over the next week, 10 days, 11 days before this goes live, there'll be maybe a little more guidance on how it'll work. And then as well, after the 28th, we may have some better clarity about how quickly the program is working. My guess is probably still about 2 weeks, maybe as long as 3 weeks to actually start receiving benefits. But it does seem like the system is getting a little bit better, at least for regular unemployment.
So, William, thank you.
Sure.
And I do have a question. Maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a question. And I think this goes to your point about being a little hazy right now. Because as we go through the unemployment process, are you available for work and are you looking for work? But yet, one of the conditions we're in right now with COVID-19 is that as employees, if we feel uncomfortable, we don't have to go to work. So
that's right.
Is that part of that haziness that kind of adds
right
to the conversation as opposed to solves anything?
Exactly. So you can have a legitimate medical reason for not being able and available to work and or not working, which is a little contrary to the language of the statute, but California has put out some guidance to suggest that that's okay. Again, you know, it's a little unclear when we get into maybe July or August and the public health concerns with COVID-19 are hopefully, you know, significantly diminished, whether those requirements will be tightened up. And so you can't just say I'm staying home because I'm afraid of getting, you know, sick, when, you know, in the general populace, those illness rates have dropped significantly, but we'll just have to see how that unfolds. We don't really know right now.
Okay, thank you, William. I know you've got to hop to another call at 11, so thank you so much for joining us with those clarifications. Again, the system is responding in positive ways. Certainly, there are issues to work through, but we seem to be in a better, more productive place and more comprehensive place as dealing specifically with the independent contractors and self-employed. So another bright light on the horizon.
Yeah, so hang in there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, William. Yep. Okay.
Craig, toss it back to you in just a moment. And first, a comment as part of our section here in Northern California's Northwest and Nevada. Just an update there that last on the 8th, unfortunately, Governor Sisolak did pull the plug on golf in the state of Nevada, and that order came down effective through April 30th. So things were going well, and then things didn't go so well, as we've heard from counties and other parts of the state of California as well. So we hope that that order does in fact expire at the end of the day on April 30th, and we have golf again back in Nevada on May 1st. So we'll keep you up to speed on what's happening there as well. So Craig, one of the things that's happened recently, and I think it's good news, it would sure seem to be a good sign, which is Governor Newsom talking to Governor Blake in Oregon and Governor Inslee in Washington, and Placer County reopening, really having to do with the golf courses. And in some cases, I know this has happened in Yolo County as well, getting together and talking to the health officers. So my point there is there seems to be a lot more conversation between the authorities, if you will, and whether it be a private course or a daily fee, or even going at them individually or as a group, that seem to be good signs, but also very, very productive. And any thoughts on that collaboration being more effective?
But Len, I have two thoughts. First of all, it's an interesting set of states from the golf industry's perspective, because Washington and California are pretty much shuttered. Oregon has permitted golf on a certain basis almost throughout. I don't think they ever closed it down. So that's encouraging that we have at least one of the members of the partnership has had a different point of view. Of course, the state has a different profile than California. I will also say that we're seeing conversations that are beginning to open. The smaller the jurisdiction or the less populous the county, the more direct the conversations are, perhaps between the golf industry and a health officer, or sometimes a member of one of the Board of Supervisors staff, something like that. And I think the strategy is going to be a little bit different in each county. I know in Los Angeles County, because there are such substantial municipal systems, and I need to remind everyone that at the beginning of this, it seems like 10 years ago, but it was just 30 days ago, when Governor Newsom issued his statewide stay-at-home measure, and a number of cities and counties in Southern California, really almost at the identical time, they worked in unison, issued much stronger directives. Those very cities and counties that have substantial municipal systems, and I was on the phone with some of them late into that evening, had determined that they were going to open their municipally owned facilities. So that was a signal that they were construing the original stay-at-home orders or safer-at-home orders, depending on what they're called, at least in the southern part of the state. A little different in the Bay Area at the time. They had interpreted them as permitting golf on a certain basis. So I've always said we kind of won that debate in the court of law, and if we handled ourselves correctly, there would come a moment again, because immediately when which we could reinvoke that what I would, for want of a better term, that victory into a very early reintroduction as part of a phase-in back to normal economic life. Because I think we all understand golf is peculiarly amenable to these particular directives. But what happened was that public opinion turned against the whole notion. People became frightened. As SCGA put out earlier in this week, we were very taken by the results of a Los Angeles County poll with a very large sample. It's large enough that the margin of error was only 2%. Indicating that despite the fact that 60% of those polled had either lost jobs or lost substantial hours and had taken enormous financial hits, 90% were in support of the stay-at-home orders, which include closed beaches, closed golf courses, closed hiking trails, closed everything. So there was this incredible public reaction to just shut everything down. That was not a negation of the claims that we made. It was just the recognition that sometimes when public opinion turns against you, instead of diving head on into that enormous tsunami, it's better to let it crest, go away, and then bide your time for a better day and a better moment. And I think that's what we've done effectively. They jumped the gun in a few places, and there's going to need, and they may have a little bit more difficulty getting the audience or the dialogue that you suggest in order to come back online. So I asked a fairly simple question and got this incredibly long answer because it is complicated, it is nuanced, and I do think that we have carved out a very definite lane for early reintroduction. I also believe it's going to be incumbent upon the golf industry to perform when we're given the chance. We had no chance when, as I just suggested, when those municipalities open golf after issuing stay-at-home directives, we didn't do a very good job. And of course, that job is much more difficult at a busy municipal golf course than it is at a private club. But keep in mind, politically, in almost every jurisdiction in California, and certainly every major urban jurisdiction, to make a private-public distinction at the opening of your ask to say that one can and the other can't is a political non-starter and loser. To recognize that the equal application of law might have an unequal result that favors private over public, that is a different matter entirely. And that may seem as a distinction without a difference to many of you, but it is a distinction with enormous political difference. And keep in mind, politics, public opinion matters greatly to us here, and we ignore it at our great peril. Finally, Pew did a national poll just over this last couple of days, and 70% of the American population, and it's probably greater here in California because when you do a national poll, that includes places in the country whose politics are quite a bit different on this subject than California. But 70% on a national poll are far more worried about early reintroduction and a second wave that brings us back to this point than they are about delaying a little bit because of the economic distress that all of this has caused. In the background, all these public health officers know one thing about the last great pandemic in America, the great pandemic on this scale. We've had a lot of minor ones, but those have been much more controllable, not because of anything human beings have done, but because the viruses themselves simply weren't as lethal or as amenable to transmission or as vibrant as this one is. But in the Spanish flu, it was not. And San Francisco is a great example, perhaps the best example in the nation. It wasn't the original flu epidemic in the winter of 1918 that was so devastating. It was the second wave in the winter of 1919. And I believe 70 million persons in the world, and the world was much smaller then, died of that flu. And it was about 700,000 Americans, which means that I'm not sure whether that number is very close to the losses in the Civil War, in which we lost more persons than any other war in American history. And the Spanish flu echoed that, or is roughly matched that number, and it was the second wave. Now we know a whole lot more about viruses and what to do than we knew then. Nonetheless, that's in the background, and I hope everyone keeps that in mind as we press to be a reopener. And as we actually reopen, I think we're going to have an enormous responsibility to do it right. Now, as John Easterbrook said, it's starting to dawn on everybody that when we do reopen, suddenly the revenue streams that everyone projected in terms of, filled driving ranges, by the time we open these golf courses, that the demand is going to be so pent up, people are going to want to get out on these golf courses. But for the daily fee and municipal courses that are entirely dependent on revenue that comes in from the general public as opposed to a club, keep in mind that you'll probably have to close half of the driving ranges, and maybe even the first week of opening, they may not be open. Municipal courses that are used to running cattle drives are probably going to be running 12 to 15-minute tee intervals, and a whole host of practices that are going to change the bottom line dynamic. Of course, some bottom line is better than the zero that's going on today. I understand that. But I think but keep in mind that the slow roll, even though golf is part of the early slow roll as opposed to movie theaters and anything which is indoors, there's even a slow roll within the slow roll before we get back to normality. So, as I've been telling a lot of persons, however, first things first, Let's see what we can do, not just to get open, but keep in mind for those who own or manage facilities, it's important to them from a legal standpoint and a liability standpoint to have the sanction or the imprimatur or the blessing of health officers before they run out and do something and potentially create legal liability. After all, Californians should know better than anyone. I think we're the litigation capital of the universe, that anyone can sue anyone for any reason, no matter how bad, at any time, and they do. So that's something that I haven't seen much in this conversation, but I'm going to bet that owners and managers of golf courses have dealt with that issue a great deal. So at the risk of sounding like a politician who spoke so long that everyone forgot the question, Len, I hope I answered the question.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And the complexities continue. There have been, even Governor Newsom talked about, don't be surprised if your temperature is taken as you enter a restaurant, the disposable menus, and conversations have started in our industry about tour events and junior events, about the distances with the registration tables and the handling of the scorecards and the flag sticks and on and on and on and on. So again, rolling back out, it has the same set of complexities and if not more than how we got in. So Tom, you have a question about Orange County, I believe, correct?
Craig and Len touched on it just now. We get many questions about these practices and searching for guidelines for reintroduction whenever it comes. What kind of conversations are going to be or are we going to ensue regarding these guidelines? You've mentioned a couple things. Len mentioned a couple things, menus and golf cars and things like that. I know there's been a couple of agencies that have also asked that question. What kind of timeline do you feel that we'll be looking at as far as being able to answer those kinds of requests for those kinds of guidelines?
Well, Tom, that's a bit of a hanging curveball, I think, because as both you and Len know, because you're both members of the board of directors of the California Alliance for Golf, next Tuesday afternoon, there's a meeting at which I think we're all hopeful that California Alliance for Golf will coalesce around, will sort of take the best of all of these best practices that are disparate around the state and put them together into one basic template to give to everyone in the state to sell to their health officers among themselves. It may have to be tweaked to local circumstance. I know the way things are going in those counties where the dialogue has begun, the golf community has taken that very supplicatory approach of saying, these are our ideas, Mr. Public Health Officer. We're just submitting them to you as a draft. What do you think? You can mark it up. We're prepared. We want to get open. So we're prepared to do it. And then that's that sanction we talked about. So I'm hopeful that we'll come away with something in plenty of time, as in, well before May 1st, because we could be looking at some places in addition to Placer County that are looking at early or mid-May opening dates. Others are going to extend longer. And again, it's going to depend on particular circumstance. And some of those circumstances has to do with the number of cases and the number of hospital beds and the amount of hospital supplies. Others are just purely political, has nothing to do with the facts and everything to do with perhaps the way in which they regard their golf communities. But I think, but again, Tom, I'm hopeful, and I think you and Len are too, that coming out of that conversation will be a very quick pivot towards a standard document that maybe we can stick all of our logos on and parade it around the state.
Hey, Tom, this is Jeff.
Yeah, I think
John's there. Good. Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, it's funny, as Jeff and I were on a call this morning, I think the national allied bodies, as we did going into this with, the closures and the letters and the coordination, we are PCSAA, CMAA, and the PGA of America, which are the operators, are collectively coming and collaboratively coming together to maybe do a national recommendation, as hard as that may be. with some of the things that you're talking about. And again, you know, having operated golf courses for 35 years of my life, and to hear some of the, you know, yeah, we'll just open, right? And so you, again, the 250 of you on the call here, you're all operators, and you go, well, wait a second, what does open mean? You know, how's my range work? Can I have my bathrooms open? What do I have to do for staff if they have to clean them? What does the definition of a sanitized golf cart mean? You know, the social distancing aspect of this is the easiest part of it. And that's why, you know, as I don't know if it was Len or Craig, you know, an 18-hole equity golf course that does 12,000 rounds typically, you know, it's pretty easy, you know, not easy, but it's much easier to open that facility up than it is to open up a resort facility that has members and guests coming in from all over the world again, and has 54 holes and, you know, multiple starting places. And so, I mean, it's going to have to be a layered in approach, and it's going to have to be very still adapted locally and regionally. But what the Allied Group is putting together, you know, Jeff Price, who's on here, is leading the Allied Group in the marketing efforts. And then the operating groups will kind of, again, from a Halo brand, national brand, you know, come up with these guidelines that can be implemented and tweaked and managed at the local level. My guess is we don't have a lot of time because decisions are being made. And I think the biggest thing we have to do as an industry is open responsibly. Because if, again, probably the most consistent call I get is from our operators out there who are having challenges policing once they get back open. So that to me is, I would say we will have something in the next, you know, 10 to 14 days. That may not be fast enough for everybody, but again, Jeff and I were on a call earlier today. As I've been sitting on this call, Red Evans from the GCSAA has been calling me. So I'm sure he's got some more updates, and we have 2 calls scheduled for Monday and Tuesday next week. So we're on it. We know the urgency. Again, as an operator, and you all being operators, you know the complexity of this and the way we think. So we just have to make sure that it's still administered and localized, literally down to the facility. So the best practices will be something that, as a guide, and again, manipulated and done to the extent that we can have a medical expert look at some of the recommendations that we're doing. We are going to do that as well. So we want to kind of phase it back in as the government has laid it out, and we think that'll help some other states. And again, hopefully more. You know, next Friday when we're on this call, I think we'll have a lot more information to share there. Jeff, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I would just echo, John, what you said about, as we've been thinking about it, we've kind of thought of 3 distinct work streams. And the first part of this can't be marketing, leading operations. The operational answers and the framework of what are the phases of safe and responsible return to golf, and the ability to execute that consistently, both first and foremost for the health and welfare of everyone involved, from the employee side, the customer side, the local authority side. That's paramount, but also that it's easy to kind of understand based on the local nature of how, as you were talking, various counties, various regions having a different kind of opportunity to get back to normal more quickly than others, and we see that across the country. So the operational side, to John's point, with medical recognition and a blessing, so to speak. And Craig, I thought your point was really well taken. Of it's not, that can't just be a national endorsement. It has to be at the local level that it can work with the county level and the state level, et cetera. Then we think there's a laddering up to how you communicate at the ground level, the grassroots level, so that depending on where you are in a phase, there's some best practices in terms of how to communicate to customers, to members, so that we're not kind of stepping on each other's toes, but there's a general sense of, depending on the phase you're in, here's a playbook to be able to use in terms of communication. And then we think there's an opportunity, and Seth has said this a couple of times in the last week, that as we're one of the first recreation opportunities to come back, as we've looked and done analysis over the last year of the greatest opportunity to bring new golfers in are folks looking for health and wellness, and golf has not done a great job marketing that message. So in addition to welcoming those that love the game back as one of the first opportunities for recreation in a world of social distancing on a level of scale, I think we can appeal to folks that maybe never thought about golf, but in a new mindset and in wanting to have health and recreation, that golf can be an answer for lots of folks, not just the 25 million across the country that are already engaged. So we're trying to think of it in those three levels of how do we collectively and collaboratively build a plan, and then allow each region and section across the country to be able to adapt and roll something out, but that we can kind of message on a national basis about the benefits of the sport. So John, well said, and Craig, again, your leadership and insights have done amazing things in California, but we're paying close attention from a national basis as well. So thanks for all that you're doing on behalf of the industry.
Thanks, everybody. That's really, really good. It seems like it was more than just a hanging curveball. It was my 40-mile-an-hour fastball that allowed that dialogue. So at least like to take credit for that speed anyway. So thanks for the responses. Len.
So to everyone, and I'll toss it back to you, Tom, to wrap up. So Jeff, thank you. John, thank you. William, William had to leave the call, but our thanks to William, Craig, and obviously, each day we're getting a little smarter on how to approach this. Each day we're realizing the complexities of getting back into business, but still, that's where we want to go. And each day there's more and more communication, and obviously starting nationally and then drilling down to locally as we implement the changes and best practices in our new way of life. So on behalf of us here in Northern California and our board of directors and President Moriarty and our Nevada colleagues and residents, thank you all for being with us again. And Tom, I'd like to turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Len, and thanks to everybody. And if we've progressed far enough, Jeff and John, we look forward to having you and the two of you and Craig with that discussion next Friday. That will be a very welcome discussion for many of us. So thank you for that. Again, I'd like to remind you before we go to Tony Letendre, our president, for a short message that the Northern California, Southern California sections are here to help with any questions that you might have. On the screen right now is contact information for both Len and myself, as well as the websites that were mentioned earlier. So please don't hesitate to contact us, especially in these times. We're here. We can point you in the right direction. And speaking of the right direction, here's our president, Tony Letendre.
I don't know about the right direction, but I'm trying to get direction from everyone else. So thanks for the credit there, Tom. But no, I appreciate everybody just being on the call and being patient with as we go through this process. I think the biggest thing we can do is just gather as much information and keep that information at our forefront. And as Craig said and a couple others said, throughout the dialogue, to make sure that we're, be patient through this process and make sure that we operate as one collective, which is golf, and not try to go rogue, so to speak, and in what we do. I think it's best for all of us not to get a bad rap as a golf business, and I think it'll help us all in the long run. It's all new normals that we all have to adjust to, and I think our members, our guests, our clients, whoever it is, I think they're going to understand that we do have to operate under this new normal, so we don't necessarily have to rush back into our day-to-day 100% operating. So I think everybody will work with us, and I know everybody's got struggles out there. If anybody wants to chat, I'm available via email. You can reach me here at Dove, or you can call my cell phone. But if somebody just wants to share some stories or just talk, I know being cooped up at home has been a challenge for a lot of people. So thanks for the opportunity to address everyone, and thanks to everybody again on the call for all your support and help and information, and our national leadership for doing what they can for us, and making sure that we have some concessions and some extensions on dues and things like that for those that may really need it. So thanks very much, Tom, Len, for you guys as well. Every week I say this, but we couldn't do it without you, and thanks for leading our sections. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks for your leadership. And again, thanks to John Lindert, who's a regular now on these calls, and we appreciate that. Jeff and John, Tom Brawley as well, and of course Craig Kessler for his ongoing leadership throughout this crisis, and we really appreciate that. Again, I'd like to remind you that if we didn't get to a response for your questions on the chat, we will respond via email, whether it be from Jeff or John or Craig or myself or Len, and we'll get those responses to you ASAP. Remember, these chats are Monday and Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, and next Monday at this time, we have Jeff Jensen, who is the regional representative for the Golf Course Superintendents Association. We'll have a lot of input in regards to, especially regards to reintroduction and what's happening on that front, as well as Craig. So we appreciate you being here. The Southern California section, as you know, we're suspended our activities through Memorial Day. I'd like to remind you too that our summer meeting in June will be a online meeting, so look for that information. We were originally scheduled at Tamarisk, but with the COVID crisis continuing, that has been canceled. And as I mentioned, we'll do our June and our summer meeting online. So watch for that. Watch for the notifications of these calls. We appreciate your time and appreciate your questions, and we'll look forward to seeing you Monday. So thanks a lot.